Hey everybody, this is Eric Enge. You have reached the Digital Marketing Excellence Show. I'm thrilled to have Rand Fishkin and Neal Schaffer here with me. Say hi, guys.
Hi, Eric.
Hey, guys.
Oh, there you go. I was waiting for you, Neal, to get yours in there. Great. I'm so happy you guys are here. I mean, as you know, and people watching this show know, the reason why we are here is that we want to talk about Twitter engagement and some cool things about that. And recently we published a study on the Stone Temple Consulting website where we looked at, well, it was 4 million total tweets, but 2 million in what I'll call Western languages. And we found some really cool stuff. But before we get into that, Rand, just give a few words about how you think about yourself. Without being overly humble, please. I did that as a challenge to you, and then Neal will let you do it next.
I have the longest mustache on this video hangout, and I'm very proud of that. I achieved it by not shaving. It's really a work of beauty. So, for those who might not know, I founded a company called Moz, and I was Moz's CEO for a long time. Stepped down earlier this year, and am now an individual contributor, and I use the informal title Wizard of Moz. I've done lots of other things. I co-founded Inbound.org. I co-authored The Art of SEO with Eric and Jesse and Stefan, and have been generally a big sharer of content, and hopefully someone who's helping marketers learn more about the fields of SEO and social media marketing and content marketing. I'm particularly passionate about trying to make the operations and the platforms of the search engines, Google and Bing, and the social media sites, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the rest, more transparent. I believe that there's a lot of information that these companies have about what works and what doesn't work and why it does and how they measure things, how they choose to rank stuff higher or select content to be promoted or whatever that isn't shared. And I think that's information that's critical not only to marketers but to consumers and users of all kinds of these platforms. I wish the companies themselves were transparent, but if they're not going to do it, you know what? We're going to do it for them. There we go, and we're going to help you do it. So before you go, Neal, so there's the book that Rand was referring to, second edition. By the way, third edition of Art of SEO will publish in March or April, I would guess. Awesome. Very cool. So, Neal.
Well, it's an honor to be here, Eric and Rand. Big fan of both of your works. And my name is Neal Schaffer, for those of you who don't know me. I am a social media author, speaker, consultant. Written 3 books. Maximize Your Social, conveniently right behind me is my latest book. I began in social media. I began a consulting company in January of 2010, and at that time I realized that what the industry needed was help in creating a strategy that they could align social media with their business objectives as well as education. So the book is really a result of my social media strategy consulting, which I still do, and about the education and empowering others and trying to make companies as self-sufficient as they can be in their social media marketing by leveraging best practices that I've learned working with my clients, with my own brands, and really trying to share those through book, through speaking, and through hangouts like this.
Excellent. Well, thanks to both of you for joining. And gosh, I mean, all 3 of us, really enjoy using Twitter. It's a great platform, and it's to me an opportunity to get out in front of a lot of different people. And for that reason, we went ahead and decided to do this study where we looked at, what I like to call a bazillion tweets. That's it's a technical term. But one of the things that we did a little different is that we used Followerwonk to measure social authority, and we decided to look and see how social authority impacted the share rate of things. And I'm sorry for not doing this a full-blown screen thing. I'm a little, believe it or not, after all these hangouts, I'm still a little crude on this stuff. But here's a chart that shows engagement by social authority. Just to explain what it is.
Eric, can you zoom in on that PowerPoint a little bit?
I'm going to try. All right, let's see.
Right there. Yeah.
How does that work?
Click that plus button next to where it says 110%.
I no longer have the plus button. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect.
How's that?
That looks terrific.
Looking good.
Okay, good. All right, that'll be my modality for doing this then. Okay, so what the chart shows is the bar height, obviously corresponds to the percentages over the left, but what the percentage means is what are the chances that you will get at least one retweet or one favorite. All right, and so with people with low social authority, you'll see that the chances are under 10%. And for people with very high social authority, I mean, if we look at 90 to 99, it's like they can tweet something like what they're eating for lunch, or how long they had to wait to get in the bathroom stall before doing a number 2, or whatever it is that they want to tweet about, and they're going to get retweets, right? I mean, it's almost impossible to avoid. Of course, very few of us are at that very top end, and probably most of our viewers aren't at the very bottom end, and we're somewhere more in the middle.
Yeah.
But Rand, this was all based off of Followerwonk social authority.
Yes.
And as Moz is the publisher for Followerwonk, or the people who offer the Followerwonk tool, maybe you could talk a little bit about what the social authority measurement really is.
Yeah, sure. So Peter Bray, who founded Followerwonk before Moz bought it, always had a real passion around discovering what does true authority mean on Twitter, and how can you identify someone who's a real influencer on that platform. And one of the challenges that he encountered, that he and I have talked about for years, is the frustrating vanity metric of followers, right? And using the idea of just raw followers to indicate how important or influential someone was. And the problem is that on Twitter, like on many things, that's pretty gameable, right? Through a follow back and unfollow strategy, you can grow your follower count pretty massively. There's also weird anomalies where certain people have huge numbers of followers but are not particular influencers, and they rarely tweet, and all these kinds of things. And so Peter came up with what I thought was a really brilliant idea, and that was to create a number that was not based solely on follower count, but based on every input we could possibly get, mapped to, through a machine learning algorithm, mapped to and correlated with the number of retweets that the average tweet sent by an account receives. And so your graph there, I mean, I look at that graph and I'm very, very proud of social authority, right? Because it shows that it's performing exactly as it should, that essentially the more social authority you have, the higher engagement you can expect to get. And social authority really is exactly that. It's a measure of what is the likelihood that if this person sends a tweet, they will get, in particular, many retweets, but I think favorites and replies are probably well correlated to that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And in our experience with it, we saw the similar data when we looked at retweets and favorites separately. We saw similar data. They track each other. Just a parenthetical that we didn't really emphasize in the study at all. Clear trend of tweets getting more favorites than retweets, kind of across the board on every metric we looked at. Which
Wait,
was,
sorry, can you say that again? Tweets get more favorites
than retweets.
Got it. So if I retweet you, that retweet of what you originally sent is more likely to, is less likely to get favorites than your original tweet was, or than if I merely quoted you and it wasn't a retweet.
No, I mean, if I do an original tweet,
yeah,
and then I go back later and count up how many retweets or favorites I got, I'll have more favorites.
Just in general, you mean the average tweet is more likely to receive a favorite than a retweet? You
got it.
Yes, that makes total sense. Got it.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up one more slide because This is, hang on, bear with me, people, for a second while I get this up. And how's the size of that looking? Do I need to expand that?
You have black screen. Oh, no, that looks great.
Okay, good. So, basically, here is a chart that shows the likelihood of getting at least one retweet based on if you have an image in your post versus if you don't have an image. So the upper chart shows your chances of getting at least one retweet if you have an image versus the lower one, which shows your chances if you don't. And the interesting thing about this is we actually had another way of looking at it, which we also measured the total number of retweets you might get. And we found that you would get 5 to 9 times more retweets by including images than not. So not only is it more likely you'll get at least one, but you'll get 5 to 9 times more. Wow. Stunning stuff. Neal, why don't you start us off with some comments on just on images in general, and the value of those in your experience.
I'm not surprised by that data at all. I think that we've seen similar data studies with images, whether it be in tweets or how photos are more engaging on Facebook or what have you. And then you have these pure visual social networks that have come out of nowhere, right? With whether it's Pinterest, Instagram, or Snapchat. So we engage more with visual. It is shown more prominently in the timeline, and therefore it's not surprising that it's going to get more engagement. In this case, retweets.
Yeah, totally. Rand, any thoughts on that?
Well, so I think the interesting thing for me is this data is useful, but I think can lead to dangerous behavior. So I tried a couple of experiments. Granted, they were not nearly on the scale or with the scientific rigor of what you've created here, but I tried a few experiments over the summer with tweeting images, specifically image-based tweet storms. And tweet storms have been kind of something that's popped onto the radar this year, kind of end of last year, I think with people like Mark Andreessen and Benedict Evans and others who've popularized those, particularly in the field of technology and social media. But when I attempted those, I actually found that by filling up my followers' feed with multiple image blocks, I had my most lost followers during times when I tweeted images the most heavily. And so I would say images on Twitter work great when they stand out from the crowd, but when you're overwhelming, I think when you're overwhelming the timeline, right, if you think, oh, I should only ever tweet images, or you know what, I'm going to tweet image after image after image, I think you might actually shoot yourself in the foot. I certainly shot myself in the foot, and I could see my stats in Followerwonk, right? My lost followers, those days were the highest they'd ever been.
Yeah, no, I think it's great advice, and it's a theme that I think is very important with all of this. Data like this can be useful, but it absolutely can be abused, right? And a companion comment would be, well, okay, I'll just start throwing up random images, and I'm going to get more retweets. And well, no, it has to fit the context of what you're publishing, right? I mean, it's not just flinging stuff out there for the hell of it, or like you said, a tweet storm, which a whole bunch of tweets in quick succession. Well, no, that's not what the audience is looking for. And I agree. The sense of this is what makes it useful is how it stands out from the rest of the crowd of tweets that are out there. As soon as every tweet becomes an image, then it obviously won't play anymore. So do you guys have other tips on things that you should do with images to get more out of your tweets?
Yeah, one thing that I have done recently that I've seen actually work really, really well is I installed a browser plugin. Well, I've had it installed for a while, but I started using it for Twitter, and it's called Awesome Screenshot. It's a great little screen capture program, right? You just kind of click on it. It sits in the browser like a toolbar, just a little icon, and then you can capture an area of the screen. And I do that quite frequently. I get to an article. there's a particularly interesting paragraph or list or graphic or visual or photo illustration. And so I'll screenshot that, save it, send it in my tweet alongside the article, and I think that that really does encourage more engagement, more retweets, more favorites, and just more people clicking on that. I can see that when I use Bitly for tracking the success of the tweets that I send. And so I think that's just a really tiny, costs you less than 30 seconds to do that, but if you can find something visually interesting about the pieces that you're sharing, and you can capture those yourself and then share them alongside the tweet, I think that has creates real opportunity for more engagement.
Well, it's highly relevant, right, to what you're talking about. It kind of fits in, it reinforces the point. It's using the fact that people are visual in the right way.
Yeah, I mean, here's actually a great example. So 3 minutes ago, right, Lisa Beyer, who apparently is watching this Google Hangout, I'm honored, Lisa, that you're joining us. But she tweeted a screenshot of the images chart that you had shown, Eric, and I think that to me, that tweet is far more engaging than if she had just said, "I'm watching, Stone Temple and Rand Fishkin and Neal Schaffer talk about tweets." That creates, for me, much more engagement. I want to click that. I want to make it bigger. I want to see what's on that chart. I'm then more interested in, hey, maybe I want to learn more about this Twitter study, and also, hey, I should be following Lisa.
And by the way, if you're out there, you should be following Lisa. So there.
Yes.
At Lisa Beyer, right there. There's your plug, Lisa. She didn't pay me for that either. Neal,
I'm already following her, so I feel really good about that.
There you go.
We connected recently too, so we're all in the same boat here. I would take it one step further than what Rand was saying. Don't make users go out of their way in order to be able to create their own visual to post on Twitter, because a lot of users won't. You need to have what I like to call visual voice. But if you're blogging or creating content on your website, you need to add images to it using images that you've provided them. Over at Maximize Social Business, proud to be number 29 on the Inbound Org 50 Marketing blog list, but I've been passionate of making sure that we include an image in every single blog post, going back to our very first blog post in 2008 and creating our own imagery that would hopefully, if people wanted to share it, not only on Twitter, but obviously on Pinterest as well, which now drives second most traffic outside of Twitter for us. It opens up a lot of different opportunities. So from a content creation or content marketing perspective, you must include visuals. And even if you're a B2B like Maximize Social Businesses, there is a way to do it. On the flip side, if you yourself are curating content, which you should be, you're probably sharing a lot of content already on Twitter. Why not, if you have Buffer like I do, to share content? It's very, very easy. If you find those images on a blog post, to basically hover over the image where the buffer button, if you have it installed in Chrome like I do, should appear, and it'll automatically create the tweet with the photo embedded in your tweet that then you can post later. And I do find that those seem to get a lot more engagement than those that don't. But it all comes down to the relevance of the photo, whether you are the content creator or the one that's sharing. Obviously, graphs and data, infographics, these are things, if they showcase what the content is about, it's perfect. I don't understand why more bloggers don't include more visual, more data. Instead of just a link, show the data visually, right? And I think that they're going to be more, they'll be seen more as a resource. People spend more time on their site. It's really, it's good for everything vis-a-vis their content and social media marketing.
Yeah, no, that's great. A great addition. And since Rand mentioned Awesome Screenshot, which I also use, I'll throw out another tool there for people too. I use Canva for just really quick markup of images. Makes it really easy if you want to take a stock photo you've gotten or a picture you've taken, screenshot you've taken, throw some text on it, get a little nice background behind it, do some styling. These are things you can do to take something and just make it that much more appealing and that much forceful. Much more forceful. And the other thing that I just want to throw out there as an imagery tip is there's little subtle things you can do to avoid forcing people to think. right? And so an example is if you are in, like any tool today that allows you to create pie charts, they all have this big flaw in my mind. You get your pie chart, and let's say you have only 2 slices in it, and one's like 33%, the other 2/3. And this one will be red, and that'll be green, and there'll be 2 labels down here. A green label says what's in the green one, and the red one. Put the text in the pie slice. Don't make them go through the trouble of like matching these things up, right? You got to make it. It's funny. You wouldn't think, oh, that's hardly any effort at all. But those little touches of preventing the brain to spend another 10 milliseconds, 100 milliseconds, whatever it is, speeds up the processing time, will increase your engagement dramatically with your images. Very important.
Good call. Hey, Eric, I had a quick question about the data analysis that you did on this.
Sure.
Do you have any numbers around by social authority, the distribution of the number of tweets that were sent with images versus sent without? Like, do people with higher social authority tend to send more visuals, or do people with lower? I'm just curious, mostly.
Great question.
Well, we do have that data. I don't have it in readily shareable form with me right here, right now, because it's like in a massive spreadsheet.
Right. Yep.
But I'll actually post some follow-up comments in the comment stream after the show.
Yeah. You should share that graphic on Twitter.
Hey, that's a good idea. I bet you that will increase engagement. Just drawing a conclusion here, but in fact, I got to take a quick note to do that, or else I'll forget. But before I do, I actually to throw up another chart, because this is one of the ones that's kind of stunned us, because it's so contrary to what we've heard from other people, and that is that in our look at this data, time of day, it was like a flat line. It just seemed to make so little difference, and I've heard over and over again that there's a right time of day. Now, to be fair, right, about this, we didn't take only people on the East Coast of the United States, so they're all in one time zone, and see what kind of engagement that they got if they tweeted at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
We did not measure that. We were measuring in a more aggregated sense. So this is, the data is largely spread across, well, most of it's in North America, but with a fairly strong European contingent. But it wasn't like we saw any clear evidence that 10 in the morning was better than 4 in the afternoon. So what are you guys' thoughts?
Well, so the big thing for me is, I think, not analyzing where the users are located may not be all that meaningful. It wouldn't surprise me if you would still see that flat line based on where someone's located. However, if you could classify the geographic distribution of their followers, which is something we do in Wonk, and so conceivably you could get the data out of there and maybe just do a sampling, but that would be fascinating to see, right? If the location of people's followers, like if it turns out that I have very, very heavy East Coast of the U.S. following, even though I'm in the West Coast of the U.S., or very, very heavy Western European time zones, because it turns out that from about Istanbul / Johannesburg, South Africa, all the way to Portugal, I've just got a lot of followers in those time zones. Then I think that would be fascinating to see and to look at. But it would not shock me to learn even then that this is flatlined, because I think that when you're sending tweets very, very late at night and very few people are online, in the morning when people wake up, they look back through the tweet stream. And going back through my tweet stream, in the morning is not, if I get up between 7 and 8 a.m., I can easily scroll back to midnight the night before and see what's happened. And so that it doesn't totally shock me that this distribution is fairly flat. I also think that because some people do that and they get retweeted, that means that you'll appear in the timeline again for folks. And so I think this is surprising on its face, but makes sense, based on how we all use Twitter.
Neal, thoughts?
Yeah, people are tweeting at the right time, right? Apparently, because it's a flat line. But applying this data, I think that deciding when to tweet is, I think people overdo it. This is one area of big data where I think it just goes back to common sense, that who is your target audience, what time are they online, are they apt to use Twitter. Definitely, Rand mentioned as well, in the morning seems to be this universal truth where people seem to be going in the morning looking for the news because that's where the news breaks, right? Yeah. So it's always been my advice that, whether it's 9 to 5 or whatever it is, focus more in the morning, don't worry too much. No need to tweet in the middle of the night if your target audience, if it's in the middle of the night for them as well. And, it doesn't matter. As Rand said, if you're tweeting, I don't know the average user that you tested here, how many tweets they're doing a day, but if it's like 6 to 10, it is very easy whenever you go into Twitter to be able to look at their timeline in the morning and see what they did the other day. So I think we're using Twitter more as a search engine. I'd love to talk more about that and get some revised data as to how many searches are being done on Twitter compared to a Google or YouTube. But if that's the case, then the timing really doesn't matter, and probably the content, the image, that is more important than worrying about what time you tweet.
Yeah, well, it speaks to another thing that we found, and I'm not going to share a chart for it right now, but like the reply levels of tweets, right, wasn't that high compared to things like retweets and favorites, which is order of magnitude more of retweets and favorites going on, probably more than that, than actual replies in the data we saw. And so, with that in mind, it's not like you need to be interacting at the same time. In fact, the way you described it, Rand, you went back, checked out the news, you're using it as a news feed, and you catch up very rapidly. It's not like you needed to have a back and forth going on. So that actually liberates you from a need to do it at a precise time of day to a certain degree.
I mean, I think Twitter would be overwhelming and almost unusable if you received the same number of replies as you did favorites and retweets. It would make that notifications panel really, really daunting. You'd be like, oh God. It's it's like going to your email and feeling like you're a bad person because you're just not responding.
Yeah, well, basically you could only follow 10 people and then you'd be done.
Yeah, and you could only have 20 followers, right? Because it just you couldn't handle anymore. I do think also when it comes to timing, one of the things that I've noticed is that during the heaviest times of Twitter's use, right, when I'm seeing the most tweets filling my timeline, that is when it is hardest to stand out from the crowd. That is the time when it is toughest to get my attention, to earn a retweet or a favorite or a click or a reply from me. And I think that's true for pretty much everyone else. And so therefore, if you are tweeting at midnight, 1 a.m., which I frequently am, right, tweeting very late hours on the West Coast when most of the U.S. and Western Europe is asleep, and I always know it's time to go to bed when I see people from London tweeting. I go, oh crap. But that is a time when it's very easy to stand out. When almost every tweet I send, I see those few people are replying and we're tweeting at each other. Oftentimes the topics are less professional. I think last night it was latke recipes, and which is not to say that is an important topic, but a less professionally focused one than what I'm usually sharing on Twitter.
Well, I guess it's sort of self-correcting in another way. Is what you're saying is if you're tweeting when most people are awake, then you're competing with most people.
That's exactly right.
People who are awake when you tweet at midnight West Coast time, they're very engaged and they're looking for everything to. So.
You've got it, and I love finding those dips in competition, right? Being able to identify a place where, hey, you know what? It turns out not many professional marketers these days are using Instagram at all in any kind of brand way to build something. And I think there's reasons behind that. It's very tough to what do you put on Instagram? How does that visual medium compare with other kinds of things? But I think Moz has a real opportunity there because no one else is there. Rather than saying, oh, everyone else is tweeting at between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. Pacific, that must be the best time to tweet. I'm not so sure about that.
Well, I'm going to give you it's not about Twitter, but it's going to emphasize the point, because something I learned a long time ago is if you're trying to reach somebody, let's say the medium is email, let's just call it email for a moment, and I'm sending them an unsolicited email trying to introduce myself and start a relationship, right? And of course, you know, oh, I want to do it while they're at work, and you know, want to make sure they're not on vacation. You know, if you have someone you've had a lot of trouble reaching, you can actually try emailing them between Christmas or your holiday of choice and New Year's, and that might be the one time when they're not so overwhelmed with everything else that they actually get back to you.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? You're kind of hitting that not quite as busy spot, and you get more people's attention.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. I found that to be true for social media on the weekends as well. I think it tends to be the case that when we're, you know, not necessarily spending all our day in our email and doing work and that kind of thing, we do occasionally. It's like, oh, you know, I'm going shopping with Geraldine, and you know, she's taking a lot longer in the shoe store than I am, and so, ooh, let's see what's on Twitter on Saturday. I think that's when I spend a lot of time going favorite, retweet, retweet. I've also noticed that I favorite and retweet things much more on my mobile device than I do on the web. I'm much more likely to reply or to quote someone on the web or to reshare with a hat tip or those kinds of things from my laptop desktop.
That would be a great thing to do a study on at some point too.
Yeah, to see what's the difference and what's the percentage of use between, you know, desktop versus mobile. I think that'd be fascinating.
Yeah, you have any comments on that in your experience, Neal, on desktop?
No. Oh no, I was going to go back to what Rand was saying about tweeting at the times, and I found that with email marketing as well. You know, instead of doing the Monday through Thursday, whatever hours of trying to send out newsletters on, you know, Friday nights or weekends, and I've been pleasantly surprised with the results, and it's probably because of that. But the other thing is, for all of you listening, if you're on Twitter, try tweeting out at like 11 else out there, and you're surprised. I do find I get a lot of high-quality conversations. I try to be asleep by 11, but in the rare case that I am awake and I have some free time, it's really a great experience. And yeah, I mean, it's true. You do find a lot of people out there that are listening, and perhaps that's because of less competition. So important point not to forget. As far as the mobile versus desktop, yeah, that's something we need a data study on. But it's, you know, when we talk about the number of retweets or favorites being more than retweets, being more than, you know, at replies or mentions, I think that's almost universal on any social media platform, right? Facebook, you're going to have more likes than comments and shares. And maybe some communities are a little bit different, and it would be good to do another study on that, Eric, if you have the budget for it. But yeah, I think that's a general thing. And maybe because in mobile it's just easier to do those things, right? It's easier just to press the official retweet button, the official favorite button, whereas on your desktop you have more time to craft and, you know, an at-mention retweet, you know, quote retweet or what have you. So yeah, that's, you know, my only feedback for that.
Yeah, so Christopher Vogelman throws in a comment here. Notion of impulse retweets. It's just sort of, yeah, sure. Yeah, off it goes.
It's a lower barrier, right? You're sort of scrolling, your thumb's already there. The mental leap of like, yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Is just much greater than sort of when you're scrolling, you can see the full feed and you're thinking, well, which ones of these should I potentially do? I think it speaks to your earlier point, Eric, about the not making people think, right, and avoiding that 10 milliseconds of neural pathways having to fire.
Yeah, neural pathways get in the way of my objective, right? So can't force them to use those neural pathways. So hey, I'm going to throw up just something to sort of introduce a new discussion point. This is another classic one that people talk about. Tweet length. We actually did see a strong correlation. You know, the thing that actually surprised me about this data, and I didn't actually emphasize this at all in the study, is that this data suggests that favorites and retweets are actually, yes, they increase as the tweet gets longer. But even if they're 131 to 140 characters, which makes it a little harder, right? Because if you're going to retweet it, you have to edit the tweet. That one actually surprised me. But would love your guys' thoughts on tweet length and what's going on there? What makes a longer tweet more likely to get retweeted?
If I had to guess, I would say that people who are crafting those longer tweets are putting more effort into the curation of the words that they're writing in order to fit into the 140 characters. And so I think as you near up against that limit, you've seen someone who's very carefully crafted a meaningful tweet rather than, a lot of those shorter tweets which you don't have to carefully craft because you're not worried about word conservation or character conservation. That's my only guess as to that. I think what's fascinating about this is I remember the HubSpot data from Dan Zarella from, what was that, 3 years ago? And his was the opposite. His was the total opposite, right? Those shorter tweets, not the shortest tweets, but the shorter ones tended to get more retweets than longer ones. And so, I remember this sort of rule of Twitter that had been around in my head for years, which was I should try and shorten this if I can. Right, and some of the logic behind that was people can modify that tweet more easily, put their own comment in there if they want, and all these kinds of things. But your data is suggesting that behavior's changed.
Yeah, at least from what Dan Zarella showed for sure. And but I think you might be right about the length. Neal, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was under the same impression that Dan wrote about some time ago, just in general on social media. But I guess the longer your tweet, the more content you have. So the more compelling of content it might become. If we can get in the debate of long-form content versus short-form content. But the other thing about longer content is there's probably more keywords, so it's probably going to be exposed to more any given search on Twitter. The other thing is if photos are getting more engagement, then a longer tweet means that I'm assuming the URL of a picture, pic.twitter.com, is also included in that character length, which could explain that as well. So those would be my my possible explanations. And once again, I wouldn't try to craft every tweet to be 140 characters. I'd hashtag it either, but don't be afraid to make a longer tweet, right?
Yeah, well, that's actually a good thing for me to check with the team that they did, is that they and they might not have. So if they filtered out the image file name in case of an image URL, so that's I'm definitely going to double check on that one. I think that's a good call, Neal. But I do think that Rand's point is a good one. If you just throw out a forward tweet, there's probably not a lot of there, so to speak.
It's tough to make something meaty in under 90 or 100 characters. Very, very challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to keep going here. Come on, there we go. Let's. I'm going to have fun with another one here. So this time, I'm deliberately choosing a chart about favorites and including links in tweets. Not particularly inspiring as a factor, and in fact, there's a crossover in the middle here, where tweets with links below that point get fewer favorites if there's a URL included than if not. And tell me, did that actually switch to the other chart? Yes, it did. And if we look at the retweets line, okay, there's some gain, but it's not really. To me, I look at something like this, and any of these things we're talking about. Rand, you set the tone early on, and I just want to repeat it. This is all about what's sort of general guidelines for what makes more compelling content, not artificial ways to take average content and try to jam it into higher shares, right? So,
but I mean, what I'm seeing here suggests to me that if I am a lower social authority, have a lower social authority Twitter account that I'm trying to grow, that links are they're no panacea, right? They don't have the same kind of power of images. And I guess that makes pretty good sense to me, right? It's tough to get a retweet or a favorite on something that requires more cognitive capacity, and certainly sharing a link means not only do you have to look at the tweet itself, you have to go follow that link, open it up, maybe in a slower browser like a mobile browser, and then go process what was shared, and is that something that I want to reshare, and then I need to go back to Twitter from the link to go do that. So that, that's a lot of steps that are required, and so I think it's not surprising to me that there is not the same delta between links as there are as images. What I would say is this does suggest to me that you've got to be very picky and choosy with the links you do choose to share on Twitter. I think sharing mediocre links is probably a poor path to growing your account's influence.
Yeah, I'd agree with that sentiment. Neal, thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, the high social authority, the drop-off on the retweets there, and I'm just wondering if that high social authority, obviously it includes a lot of celebrities, and, if we were to just take those celebrities, and I'm not talking about, the social media celebrities or the marketing celebrities, but the real, movie actors, actresses, musicians, I'm just wondering how many times they actually would post something with a link versus... Right, just posting, hey, how's everyone doing today? I worked for a Grammy Award-winning musician. Very few, they weren't in the business of content curation, right? They were content creators. So it was just, tweets. Now, once again, with the link, I'm wondering if they posted a picture or an Instagram photo or a Pinterest pin, whatever. I'm wondering if that's included here as a link, because I'm assuming that a lot of them are on Instagram, and they might be posting from Instagram to Twitter. But once again, I should have asked you this before, Eric. I'm curious as to how that data, how you define the link. If it includes, native Twitter pics or not specifically.
It does not include Twitter pictures, but here I am.
Okay.
So but I'm showing you a different chart now. This wasn't in the presentation I had, but I went and hastily cut it out of the raw data spreadsheet. This is the same conversation. You have links in your tweet, not an image link doesn't count, but a real native link to something. And this is showing what happens to the total number of retweets. The prior chart, just to flip back there for a second. Oh, wait. There we go. Did it pop back?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is showing the likelihood to get at least one retweet.
Right.
This shows the total number of retweets.
And so if I'm understanding this correctly, when you say 0.6, that means I have almost half the chance to get as many retweets as if I had shared non-link tweet.
Right. I would get approximately half as many retweets, or 0.6 as many retweets. Yeah. We do. The volume of tweets we're looking at here is actually a pretty good number. And I don't have the statistical significance calculations in front of me, but to give you an idea, for the low social authority, this data point is based on 24,000 retweets or tweets without URLs, and sorry, I'm just trying to do this math in real time. Not math, but get you guys the data point just so you get an idea how much data we were looking at. 10,000 tweets that included a URL, and that's for authority level 1 to 9. Mm-hmm. So that low-level authority, that chart is based on analyzing 30,000 tweets, about a third of which had links and 2/3 which didn't. And you got 0.6 as many retweets when you had a link versus didn't.
Yeah, I'm not sure how wholly actionable I find this, but maybe one of the ways that I haven't been thinking about this, but maybe I should, is that the tweets that I send that are pure text and the ones that are images that are very easily consumable and shareable entirely within Twitter's platform, maybe I should think of those as kind of they're the red meat kind of Twitter, right? They're the stuff that I'm giving people that people are just like, yeah, I like it, I like it, I like it. And then when I share a link, I'm essentially asking you to go do work. And so I have to have built the trust with you, with followers, in order to earn that click, right? Because I'm asking you to take another step to engage more deeply, to go do something that maybe you don't have time for, or that at least is requiring a lot more cognitive and browser and data load. And so it's kind of a request. Hey, here's a link is not that's not the red meat of Twitter.
Yeah, maybe. It could well be the case that something like that's true. And I'll tell you that the hashtag data, I'm not going to throw up every chart here because I want to have a more generic discussion about successful engagement on Twitter. But I do think that when I look through all this data, I kept coming back to there's so much opportunity to get an artificial notion of what a tweet should look like, and it's oops, my battery is about to die on this computer. That means so I'm going to keep talking, but I'm going to be fiddling with a cord at the same time. There's so much opportunity to do artificial stuff and take the wrong conclusions out of all this, and you really have to stay away from all that. It's really important to do because there's a question. Christopher Vogelman asked a very popular question here that I haven't popped up, but what's the right number of hashtags to use? And actually, there's an easy answer to that question. It's the right number of hashtags to support the content of the post. And I think at the end of the day, the data is useful, and I actually do find value in having gone through the analysis and the like. But I'm still going to use my sense of what the needs are of the post as the first and foremost guide to what I do. It's like crafting a blog post. How long should your blog post be? Well, depends. What does the topic suggest?
Yeah. Well, I think this data is a little more applicable than maybe the last few statements that you made, right? I think, for example, knowing that longer tweets are not harmful really will change some of my behavior on Twitter, right? I think I've been artificially cutting off and not sharing things that are as lengthy, and I'm gonna rethink that notion. I also think knowing that links are a little harder to get engagement on is going to make me, at least emotionally, feel better when my links don't get as many clicks and as much engagement as I hope that they would have or should have. And then I think images is another lesson that I'm going to take away. I have to be careful about the images that I share, but when I can share something that is truly compelling as an image, I do have a chance to reach many more people as a result of that. And so I think that there's a lot of actionability in here. I think the problem is saying that somehow Twitter is an algorithm like Google, and we can optimize toward it. I think that's not the case, and I think your data is doing a good job of explaining that as well, right? That there's these distributions and curves, but that we're really relying on groups of human beings who have all kinds of motivations and emotions and influences that affect their, how things go. And Twitter, unlike Facebook, unlike a lot of these other platforms, doesn't have we'll decide whether you see it or not. Right? You're going to see it. The question is, will you engage with it?
Right. Yeah. Neal, some thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's all great food for thought. I'm a big fan of a data-driven approach to social media marketing, and most importantly, for everybody to experiment. A lot of people on Facebook will experiment with photos versus videos versus links versus status updates. but how many of them are doing it on Twitter with links, with images, and without, and really measuring. So I think it's really call to action for everyone to take a more strategic approach to Twitter. But also, one thing that we forget when we do these studies, and I know you got asked this question in a comment, Eric, before this hangout, was what about the clicks? And I consider clicks sort of the hidden engagement that even if you do a social media audit on your competitors, you do not know how many people actually clicked on that link. So it's not just about the retweets and the favorites. It is, for a lot of content, about the clicks, and we don't know that. So, your own data is obviously going to be your best measure. But hopefully people thinking and applying what we talked about today to their own brand and start to tweak things around and measure and see where it goes.
Yeah, no, I agree. You definitely want to tie in, if it's Google Analytics or whatever you have for your analytics, and really dig in and understand what it is that's helping you get those visitors, assuming that that's your goal with the your overall social media strategy. And it's something that we're very mindful of here. And of course, since we were looking at 27,000 some odd user accounts, we had access to the website analytics data for approximately 4 of them. So
there you go.
We didn't consider that statistically significant, so we didn't actually pull all that in. Yeah.
Use the new, to Neal's point, you can use that new analytics.twitter.com, right, which they opened up this year, to analyze that for yourself. And I think, this is something that I do every few weeks, is I just go through and I look at the tweets that got really high engagement, that got a lot of clicks, those kinds of things. But one of the things that has frustrated me is that when I had fewer followers, my engagement was higher. And the more followers I've gotten, the lower my percentage of engagement just on all my tweets has been. And I think maybe that's because I'm attracting people who are less engaged on Twitter now, or because the stuff I'm sharing, I don't know, maybe I'm not sharing as good stuff as I used to. But I think that's been a real frustration point for me. Because Twitter is the network that I use the most, and it's the network I enjoy the most. But I have yet to have a tweet that's received a 10% engagement rate. Never had one.
Yeah.
Which is kind of scary, right?
Yeah, it is. Actually, I do have one more chart I'm going to throw up because it's actually another contrarian chart. So let me explain it to you all. Actually, I'm going to blow that one up a little bit more. Hopefully, is that still on screen?
You might want to go one smaller than that.
Okay, so this chart is showing the impact of mentions on chances of getting at least one retweet. There's 4 lines here. The bottom line shows engagement in the form of chances of at least one retweet with one mention. And the blue line, the top one, shows no mentions. And just for clarity, this does not, filtered out is all @ replies.
Okay, good. Right.
That is filtered out here. We're very careful about that. In fact, the reason why we delayed the study publication for 1 day at the last minute.
Oh, right.
I realized we hadn't filtered it out, and I went, ah! And we had a little fire drill to make sure we had appropriately filtered all that out. So what that means is there is an @ mention of another user in the tweet, but it's not at the very beginning of the tweet, so it's still exposed to the general public following the person doing the tweet.
Yeah.
So the exposure is the same. This actually suggests that including a mention of another user reduces retweet volume. And favorites data shows the same thing, by the way. And I found this a very interesting thing. My speculation on it was that even though it's not a typical @ reply, people are likely to consider it more of a conversation at that point. and maybe not jump into it. Just trying to speculate here as to what we might be looking at. Okay, stump the panel.
Yeah, kind of.
So, yeah.
Well, I guess I would say that it is more challenging to, say, to go through the exercise of crafting a very compelling tweet that includes @mentions, but isn't a reply, than to have a very compelling tweet that is a link, an image, just a short block of text, and I don't see mentions of users making their way around Twitter in the same fashion usually. So I guess this data doesn't shock me, but I'm not sure what to take away. I'm not sure whether it's a best practice to stop including usernames when I feel like that's the right thing to do. If someone, if Neal sends out a great tweet and I want to craft my own tweet based on that and share something that he shared, I want to give him credit. I'm not sure that this is going to change my behavior in that respect, but it might make me more cautious about how and where I use @mentions.
Yeah, I know. From my perspective, I think, let's say I'm resharing, an article by Neal, and say, I might say, great article by @Neal Schaffer, and include the link. My guess is that if we had a way to in the study and look just at those scenarios, because this is obviously any kind of @mention that's not an @reply that was included here, that we would probably not see what we showed here. But there probably are a number of tweets that are, somebody trying to connect with somebody they're not currently connected with, like, hey, @RandFish, follow me so I can DM you.
Sure.
Never seen that.
So I think it's, to me it gets back to something that we've said before. It's and I don't mean to downplay the study, because I do actually personally think I had a tremendously good time doing it and felt like it yielded a lot of great stuff. But you can't let anything you've seen in all this divert you from what's the context and content of your tweet demand about how you construct it. And if it demands a link and demands an @mention, because that's the way to best craft that tweet, and it should be 50 characters long, and it shouldn't have an image, then that's what you should do with your tweet.
You know what I'm curious about? This might be getting a little too detailed, but I would love to see the retweet and favorite ratio when the @mention comes after the word via or HT or H/T. I'd be really interested to see if that changes the way this graph works, right? Because then it's less of the, hey, @Neal Schaffer, follow me back, or whatever, and more of the, I found this great, visual via @Stone Temple. That's, I think, a much more compelling format for that, and I'd be interested to see that broken out.
Yeah. Well, I might be able to get them to pull that for us. It's actually not that hard. We have the content of all the tweets, so I think I will try to get that one done too.
Awesome.
Yeah, it shifts the data. So we're at the end. Neal, do you want to offer any closing comments on all of this?
No, I congratulate Eric and Stone Temple Consulting for do this and to try to share best practices through the big data. At the end of the day, it's all great food for thought, and hopefully everybody has some takeaways. But if you're already doing really well on Twitter, don't change what you're doing. But always be experimenting with new things. If you haven't tried images or numbers of @mentions, I thought that was really a strange one at the very end there. I would always, just as a social signal, as Rand said, credit the content creator or that person that I found the content from with an @mention. So that's some of them where I'm a little bit leery to suggest, but at the end of the day, obviously, you need to go with what your data suggests. And but a lot of food for thought. Thank you, Eric, for the invitation and for putting this together, and for Rand for all the great ideas.
Yeah. Hey, Rand, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think, like we talked about just a few minutes ago, I find this data actionable in two ways. One is to get a little bit more creative and try some new things around what I have been doing with Twitter. One of the things I haven't done at all is use hashtags, and I think this clearly suggests I need to try that, at least try it. And then the second thing that I really appreciate about this study is I think some of the emotional factors, right, which makes me recognize, hey, this is what's normal. This is what's average. And so when I talk to people and marketers ask me for advice about Twitter and those kinds of things, I can say, hey, not only am I giving you this advice, but here's a large aggregation of data to back up these statements. And I think that's really healthy and helpful, because one person's opinion about how Twitter works is not nearly as powerful as that same opinion backed up by reams of data and analysis. And so I think this study is a credit to you guys and the folks at Stone Temple, but really also just something that a lot of marketers can continue to lean on for the year ahead as they're pointing out to their clients, their managers, their coworkers, their teams, how they should and shouldn't be using Twitter.
Yeah, well, thank you both for being on the show. Thank you, Neal. Thanks, Rand. Yeah, for me, with Rand's note earlier that you don't shove an image in every single tweet you ever do, if you have something where you're really looking for major engagement, you'd be nuts to not include a good, compelling image, well crafted to reinforce the content of the tweet. I'm going to pay maybe some level of artificial attention to tweet length, and then the other metrics. I think I'm going to just do what the content and the context demands, as I've said a couple of times. And there maybe there'll be some tweaks along the way. I mean, but good common sense and producing great content is always a great guide in all of this stuff. So thanks everybody for watching. I know the guys have other meetings they have to go to, so thanks for being with us. But that's it for the Digital Marketing Excellence Show for today.